Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Okay, I'm recording. We're here. We're good. Y'all can hear me. Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we gather and cohere at the knife's edge of this moment. And I am looking forward to this session, this experience today. This is the second session of a series called Sensing the New Myth that I'm facilitating. And I've invited a friend, Duncan, and we're going to be exploring power and Alphadom and how we relate to those with wisdom in this emerging world and the way in which they touch money and sex and relationships and energetics. And Duncan has an interesting and unique life experience and series of experiences that all seem maybe very different from one another, but very interconnected and relating to each other. That has, through our conversations and my experiences of him, made me continually curious to learn more about him, to the point where I was excited to invite him here to the Stoa and to bring this conversation here to invoke in us deeper questions and dialogue around power and how we can be in right relationship with that. So before we get into it, I would love to hear quick from just a couple voices in the room about what has brought you here to this wee space based on what you've read about this session. Just a real quick expression, maybe 30 seconds or so. What has brought you here? So if anybody would like to speak, I would just love to see a physical hand raise and I'll call on somebody. Who will volunteer? Rain, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm here because it's a juicy topic, and I'm curious about the term Alphadom and kind of how you define that and how that connects to these other pieces, and looking forward to the discussion from this.
Awesome, thank you. How about one other person? Okay, Rhea, I'm going to unmute you.
I personally have experienced Duncan in some freestyle ciphers and really just respect him as an artist and a creator. And so I'm curious about him and I'm curious about this conversation. And when he speaks, he has my attention. So I am just like, I'm here for it and I'm excited.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So with that said, Duncan, I would love for you to start by just introducing us to a little bit about your story and where you're approaching this conversation from. And I'll also add that at the end of the hour, so at 9:30 Eastern, we'll conclude the formal session and go into a 30-minute sense-making practice with breakout rooms to continue the conversation. So I would love for y'all to stick around for that if you can. Okay, now that I've said that, yeah, Duncan, I would love to just hear from you. Where are you approaching this conversation about power from? So a little bit about your personal story, and then how that has informed your explorations and questions and perspective on Alphadom.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate and respect the Stoa a lot. All of the speakers that I've seen have been very, very, very high signal to noise ratios, and I hope not to disappoint here. So, and thanks for opening up and allowing me to indulge, hopefully not too much, in my personal background, because I think it would be a mistake to look at power, the will to accumulate power and to enact it in the world, without looking at individuals' personal stories and motivations for growing in strength, power, capabilities. Usually each individual that I've seen who has accumulated significant power, who has had the desire to do so, has had certain impacts in their own life that have prefigured that search. And my story is no exception. Very, very brief overview of deep childhood. I was the first grandchild in accelerated classes. Very smart, but very nerdy, got picked on a lot in school, and then systematically rebuilt myself after a lot of really deliberate taunting and hazing over a few years to become a class president, captain of various teams, star in different plays, really redirected my intelligence from, quite literally in a ritual one night at 11, from the pursuit of goodness and knowledge to the pursuit of power and the pursuit of strength. It was like a mirror ritual that I later checked and, you know, had some similarities to stuff that I had figured out in like Western magic books. It was like these strange echoes occur at key junctures throughout my life. And I don't need to get too into the weeds here. Suffice to say that from 11 to 13, I wrote a 13-page guide to personality assimilation, selected out for 7 key traits that I saw as people who commanded influence and respect, and then modeled those to like win a variety of accolades and awards through my peers. That was not a sustainable personality structure, because it was built on raising like my personality rank from like what I saw as second least popular in my elementary school to number 6 out of 520 in my middle school. And I did get like that granular into the specifics. Like I was that hazed in school that it was that important for me to figure out how to network and how to understand these dynamics that I was so sorely lacking in at the age of like 10. But it fell apart because it wasn't really based on a deeply embodied sense of interconnection and like authentic presentation. And that was coupled with my first mushroom trip at 21. And that triggered a real coming to reality, a really deep facing of the nature of my existence. And it triggered both a spiritual awakening and a profound breakdown, where I spent 6 months and then a year away from school, rebuilding myself and reintegrating the sudden emergence of energies coursing through my body, a sudden capacity to move my body in different ways and do yoga and get all of these different insights that my hypercognitive brain didn't compute or didn't have the background for before. And I faced a choice basically at that point. Like, in order to get reintegrated into the world, I could either stay on different numbing down medications, or I could pursue yoga, meditation, spirituality, a clean diet, and various practices, which would allow me to maintain the various flows that I was now experiencing in my reality after that false personality that I constructed had broken through. So I eventually found a variety of different paths, from karma yoga to Catholic mass to Gnostic groups in Brooklyn to Zen Buddhism. And eventually a soon-to-be ex-girlfriend directed me down a path of tantra. Now, I'm not talking about neo-tantra, sexual interplay, although those techniques have their purpose and their place. It's more the interpenetration of energies and maximization of your capacity to sense and expand perception. And this was necessary for me because my perception was wildly fluctuating, up, down, expanding. The images in my field were so wild that I needed to take power over that flux. And so I ended up living in China for a year, practicing various Taoist techniques, and then at the invitation of a friend going down to Indonesia to take part in a tantra kula that I would participate in for the next 2.5 years, learning how to center my energy within myself, flow energy and send and receive it to others, and generally focus my perception and capacity for sense-making, tracking facts, deep communication with power, and understanding more about the power of the world and how to, and the word, and how to move my energy in order to have effects on others. And this was largely due to the instability that I experienced in my early 20s. Was I was willing to put a lot of energy into this to smooth out these gyrations within my mind. So a year and a half into that, I ran out of money. I was working for free on a dairy farm in central North Carolina. I was chanting every morning to the cows, Hanuman Chalisa and various Sanskrit chants. And I was writing assiduously on alchemy and Western philosophy and different Sanskrit texts and trying to build a synthesis within my mind to explain some of these enhanced energetic states that I had within this very high demand spiritual group that I was still a part of abroad via an internet forum where we were all staying in close connection. Through that forum, I chanced to meet across the senior analyst in a New York hedge fund who saw my writing, asked, how long have you been pursuing this? And I was like, well, a month. He was like, what if you picked up a financial report? Like, what kind of connections could you find there? It's like, well, I've played poker. I've read The Economist once or twice. Why don't you bring me on as an intern? This was seriously, I was about to run out of money. My mother was sending me money to purchase prerequisite textbooks for nursing school at the age of 27. Like, I really had not had much figured out and was going all in through this pursuit of yoga, meditation, and tantra on some kind of an Ubermensch program, some kind of capacity to move and to bend reality to, in part, make up for some of the deficiencies in my background, my planning, my capacity to move it. Anyway, he said the last person they brought on was 6 years ago, and it was him. You know, tough luck, but thank you for asking. But then 2 months later, he gets a promotion to the head of Asia trading. His wife, who is really deep in this organization, says, well, why don't you bring on Duncan? And they both share a laugh. And they're like, wait a second, what about that guy? He'd at least be really grateful. So long story short, in the middle of a ritual that I was having to clear myself out and to open myself to whatever the universe had for me, within 5 minutes of the completion of that, I get an email in my inbox with the internship offer at this like super white shoe financial firm that routinely turns away Stanford MBAs. No background, no prerequisites, haven't even handed in a resume. But I'm starting to do calls to Brazil, scouting stocks out there, doing a P90X workout routine and milking cows and attending nursing school for anatomy and physiology. And that's my entire life. Fast forward 6 months, I'm going to Miami, meeting a Brazilian CEO for a potential deal, and then flying back out to Indonesia, where everything hits the fan. I get intestinal parasites, my whole body breaks down. I have to leave the tantric group, lose 40 pounds. I'm like, go down to 6'1" and 135 pounds. And then the only tether in my life is finance. So for the next 6 years, I assiduously pursue finance with all of the energetic openness and flow that I've learned from spiritual awakening and 2.5 years in a really intense tantric kula with a lot of energies flowing through. So I learned how to open myself up to interact with CEOs, with billionaires, with people in very intense, high power, high signal and high noise professions, and make sense of that and try to understand that which undergirds this reality. I live in Boulder for 2.5 years, recovering from my illness and from a lot of the really intense and somewhat manipulative energetic games within that tantric group, and then get a promotion to full analyst with the firm and move to New York to pursue that over the last few years. Through my experiences in New York as well, I learned how to not only analyze companies and see macro trends, but I experienced having personal power for the first time. I became a self-made millionaire. I gained the ability to fulfill my own desires to a level that I had never dreamed of when in 2014, I was penniless, working on a dairy farm for room and board and getting in occasional fights with the Baptist farmer who was running the place. So this is a very day and night experience, but I was still somewhat emotionally traumatized. I still had yet to fully integrate my bisexuality and feelings of inferiority from that. And I had not really rebuilt the capacity to really hold deep and lasting relationships in a New York dating scene that veers far, far more towards polyamory as the status quo in all but name only. So it's an interesting hybrid when somebody without the credentials or capacity to even date or form these bonds gets a lot of power, opens up into that field and learns with a huge amount of energetic upsurge to grow there. That's definitely one of the things that I have learned through experience, how to actually hold and honor other people in these kind of fields, but also with the caveat that a lot of the power and capacity that I had gained in Indonesia and through practice had a visceral effect on others around me, especially powered up through finance. The energy of that money and the hyper masculinization after the hyper feminization of years and years of spiritual practice, I had fused in a kind of alchemical marriage within me. This had a narcotic effect on certain people in my field who were open to it. And that presents a power differential that I did not fully understand was operating on myself and on others in my field. There are many different kinds of power differentials that I now realize and navigate, beyond the topical ones of white, male, high rational IQ and capacity with the background that I had to enter into a white collar, top tier, literally polishing the eye on the pyramid kind of job with no resume, no questions asked, just looking as I do, and with the ability to talk the talk and learn that language, and beyond that as well is the capacity, like knowing what these energetic flows are and what world capitalism is, and also having experienced pure powerlessness. So having experienced the capacity to churn and work on the highest ideals, but have no capacity to network them or put them into practice. So going into it with very high ideals and then learning that the people that I was surrounded with weren't really motivated by the same things that I was motivated by. That in order to get ahead, people cared about financial results more than anything. And that the tech companies that I was investing in and making the firm money were actually getting people in these reduced systems of mind control, of abject simplification of the complexities of thought that are necessary to actually even conceive of different systems, let alone the Schelling points to putting them into practice. I realized that over the years that I was in finance, and I realized that a lot of the connections that I was making were fairly superficial and motivated not by the quality of my ideas, but by connection to power. So that had a group effect on my field. It almost felt like the trace amounts of cocaine that are on every $100 bill in long circulation. So regardless of all of that, I stepped down from finance gradually and stepped away from it and found myself more drawn to poetry, to spoken word communication, and to group holding and community building, and found that the energies and the yogic states had a capacity to move through spoken word and freestyle vectors of communication. And so I learned how to pedal down and transition and actually take stock on how self-obsessed that I had been through a lot of my life, and how self-involved a lot of these processes were, and how informed by trauma a lot of them actually were, and how the effects on other people and also the histories of a lot of people in the fields that I was in were impressed by their own childhood trauma as well, that drew a lot of people to grow to states of power that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten to. So a lot of that backstory, I'm not covering it up, and I'm definitely willing to expand and explore and express in any vector that anybody would be interested in exploring and experiencing. We live in an era where it can be quite damaging and difficult to tell the truth and to experience things directly. We live in an era where people have a lot of very strong feelings about everybody who is trying to attain a level of power and a level of influence and a level of visibility. And I've had to reckon and continue to reckon with my own. And I've made many mistakes in relating to others, in leveraging the power imbalances that I've held, but I've also learned a lot through holding them, and just want to tip my hand. I've played a lot of poker. I want to play my cards as face up as I possibly can, because that's not the game that I want to play. And this is more than signaling. And it's really important to me that I express that, because this world is not in a great state, and I don't know the answers, but I know that higher signal and less noise, and like more actual truth and more deep emotions from people who have the chance to do things, and more vulnerability is where people like me and people without convoluted histories and backstories can actually learn how to serve other people and how to serve a collective. So with that, I'd like to open it back up to you, Tyson, and thank you again for having me here.
Great. Thank you, Duncan. So I'm going to ask a question. If anyone has any questions coming up, or on the note of like Duncan invoking, we have, many of us have strong feelings about some of these things, power dynamics and things like finance and on Wall Street, or spiritual practices and communities like Duncan's experience with tantra, things like this. Feel free to just put in the comments like any strong feelings, opinions, anything about this that points to anything that has challenged you that you're thinking about. Even if it's just a comment, not necessarily a question, just put it in the chat and let that sort of anything that might bubble up come up, because this will kind of feed the dialogue that we go into at the end of this. And one thing I'm curious about, Duncan, is, having spent time in different spiritual communities and tribes, there is definitely, and I think many times it's rightfully, but a major resentment, demonization towards finance, Wall Street, and people that hold power, which I totally get. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what lessons did you learn being in the world of Wall Street and in finance and having that experience that maybe those in the spiritual community that just turn away from it and dislike it, that they could be missing out on? What wisdom is there? And then also, I guess in connection with that, is like, what do people get wrong in general in your experience about Wall Street, finance, and people with power in those realms?
Okay. So first off, I was lucky to be in the firm that I was in. It was less Gordon Gekko than grad school. It was somewhat nerdy, somewhat self-involved within like a narrow parameter and way of seeing the world. But the head of the firm had a very strong commitment, at least in his worldview, to truth and to basically to sense making, to market behavior as sense making, and to updating his reality and learning as much as possible. And that's what you'll see. We were long-term value investors, so we weren't short-term trying to profit off of market movements or day traders or that level of gambling. We never worked off of insider information, but we did all that was legally possible to visit companies, tour entire industries, talk to as many former employees as possible about non-confidential topics. But it was a lot like doing homework. And the work that I was asked to do and that all the analysts were asked to do is 7th or 8th grade math. It's not very complicated. You don't have to put it up on a pedestal whatsoever. But that coupled with a lot of reporting, due diligence reporting, and essay writing. So I would take calls and distill that into core information about a certain company or a certain industry, talk to all the competitors, compare it with like global comps, and use that to gain an information advantage on what the markets are currently saying. the funnest part of my job was VC investing, because then you get to be a part of something that might not otherwise exist in the world. That had a lot more life in it and more impressive personalities. But like any competitive game, you want to be in the places with fewer players, or you want to be in the places where there's more uncertainty. So I specialized in Brazil, India, China. The BRIC countries were where we had the most advantage, and where somebody without a lot of background in the industry could come and make a lot of contacts very quickly. Brazil was in particular great for me because they're such an open people. It's kind of a telenovela. Everybody loves to gossip and make friends. And so the more information and the more connections you can get, the more access to opportunity, or as Warren Buffett puts it, deal flow, you're given. So a lot of it is based on reputation. We were a large firm, so we had the potential to alter people's lives with the money that we could move, and so people were more forthcoming to talk to us. Smaller firms don't get that kind of access. Now, the head of the firm is an interesting character. I'm not going to talk about him that much because he prefers to remain private, but he puts his money in the right place. He basically tithes to environmental charities that he handpicks, that are like running themselves like businesses, or running the world like a renewable, sustainable business. So at least in his mind, he's fairly sensitive, open, and though he crunches probably 300 pages of information per day, he makes his decisions based on his subconscious, based on his intuition, and needs to keep that channel clear. And the job of the dozen or so people who work for him is to order that information in a way that he could end up making the proper decision, that the information is clear signal and accurate, that it is broad and widely resourced, and that it allows his intuition to make the right choice. Because at the end of the day, you can argue that the mind doesn't actually make decisions, it just presents different outcomes and different weights, and that the will to make a choice comes from somewhere different. I will say power structure of it was more feudalism. The full analysts were kind of like knights going off into different sectors or territory, claiming land, and the industry is compensated from the top down, or at least our firm was. So meritocracy was filtered through the leading personality, the portfolio manager, who made the decisions on allocation and made all of the decisions on compensation himself. So that has its own problematic tendencies of potentially creating a cascade of psychophanic behavior, which every analyst would have to weigh within their decision-making process, not to brown nose somebody who has ultimate power on how much abundance how much of that group energy you're going to be sharing in. But it's a large pool, few analysts, so you get to experience that. So there's some interesting questions in the chat here as follow-ups.
Yeah, there are, and I'm personally curious about bringing this in to sex, relationships, energetics, and I think Ariel's question is interesting as well. So I would like to call on Ariel to ask her question, and we'll go to Engine afterward.
Hey, yeah, this is all super fascinating. I'd just be really curious to hear more like specifics about how those polarities you were discussing being married within yourself, like the feminine spiritual and the money power masculine, like impacted love and dating.
Absolutely. Well, it's there's a couple of things involved here, and I'll say first off, I was learning as much as I could to expand myself to hold the energy of finance. It was jarring to my system, coming from no money and then being with these like really directed personalities. Some of them with more capacity to hold attention than most of the monks that I had met. Like very, very centered, balanced, equanimous, focused on their goal, and with really systematic lives. So their energy was moving through my spine, and I received them similarly to a tantric guru. Like, it was just a different kind of energy moving through my system. Now that was coupled with like the receptivity that I'd experienced in finance, and I was still drawn to women and men, but mostly women, with really open systems, with really direct systems. So like dating was interesting, you know. For the first couple of years in finance, I was really recovering from illness and from the intense psychological impact of a lot of the practices that I'd experienced in Tantra and abroad. I didn't do much dating when I lived in Boulder. When I lived in New York, it opened up a lot of avenues, but largely through the ecstatic dance scene. So I didn't really date in the finance sphere. It was a bit closed to me. A lot of it was married to upper crust New York. And it was also a little bit foreign to my nervous system. So working in finance, there was a lot of tension moving through my system, and I longed to have like really open experiences and flow. It felt like a double life, and I felt like a double agent. And I wanted to understand finance from the inside and make shifts, but I wanted to date women who were serious about deepening into yoga, caring about the world, caring about energy and life. And that was what I was drawn to in my personal life. And I found that it was a really interesting feel, just like having never really had a lot of attractions to me beforehand in my life, and being insecure about my own mental state, or being insecure about where money was going to come from. I remember selling a poem for food, like when I was 22 or 23, because I was just like that short up, to being able to treat anybody to whatever meals or whatever experiences, and just not, more important than that was not having any anxiety in my body. The shift to having a fully relaxed like root system and having the lower tiers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs shored up created just a real phase shift. So I was finally experiencing this kind of magic and physical magic, but my heart wasn't fully open to it. And part of that heart not being open was also, I didn't fully believe in what I was doing in finance. And I wasn't finding people to date, or I wasn't in the right state. And it was a combination thereof. Like when I lived in Boulder, there would be regular energetic transmissions on the energy to energy level. And when I moved to New York, I found that being sexualized so very quickly. It was quite jarring for me at first, how people would like experience this energy and escalate physically. And it took about 6 months to really experience and like live in that scene without being jarred. But I would say I wish I had the fortitude to choose more long distance relationships and to choose more commitments, because a lot of the dating was just for a month or just for a couple of weeks until my emotional traumas were triggered. And then I would find some regular pretext that it would blow up or not work, or prime people not to make commitments because I had to fly to China, or I had to go here, or I had to do this and that. It was difficult too, going back into work and toughening up, because I experienced it almost like a corset being fastened on my chest and my abdomen going into work. So I would deliberately go to ecstatic dances and to like these really more open groups to just like release the tension that had built up during the day that I was literally taking on from my peers. My boss loved me. And I remember an acid trip at the Metropolitan Museum of Art very shortly after joining the firm in New York. I left and I looked down the Avenue of Poets in Central Park and looked at this building. This is where Moloch really comes in to the question in the chat. I saw it rising like the monolith from the Planet of the Apes, from Cleopatra's Needle, or whatever the obelisk is in Central Park. And I saw like the 400 lines from the top of the building where I work, just like moving out and connecting to these wealthy families all over the world that we were serving. And I heard, like, it literally felt like a voice, like this was Ra speaking to me. Like it was saying, you are here to serve these wealthy chosen. And then if you do successfully, your children will be among their number. And I remember just like taking that trip and just like walking 12 miles back to Brooklyn, not saying yes, not saying no. Previously, I'd been in the museum and was just like seeing all the funerary masks of the dead kings and being like, this is the afterlife that they were looking for. But there was one piece that most resonated in my psyche, which was this African king with a great golden staff to the side. And that staff was for his chief advisor, who was there to clean and clear the energy from the king so that he could make worthy decisions. And I looked at it and was like, fuck, that's me. That's my primary job here. I'm going to find some good investments. I'm going to find some bad investments, but I'm here to clean the energy. And, you know, when I moved from Boulder to New York, I saw myself as this living crystal on the grid line of Manhattan, trying to help clear and reset the energy there. And it was a big task, and people from Boulder were like, good luck. And I don't know how effective that I was when I was there. And I know that I've moved on from dating, and I'm talking about some of these energetic dynamics. I hope it's not too off course, Tyson.
No, thank you. Ariel, do you have any follow-up question? Cool. Engine, I would love to hear from you, whatever question is most alive at this point.
Sorry for spamming the chat. I've waited for so long to talk to somebody who's like on the inside of finance and Wall Street. And I feel like so much thought is spent thinking about how could we craft a different world, this rent-seeking Moloch that comes out of finance and Wall Street. And to have somebody who's been in the sausage factory, even though it seems like your experience is a little different than the most, is just incredible. I don't know which of the questions I asked to pick, so if you'd like to pick, that'd be the Moloch question is maybe, yeah.
Yeah, the Moloch and the economic system we need to overcome the wealth inequality, or is Moloch first?
Yeah, that's good. Maybe go to Moloch first, and then we'll move on to the question that I don't know who originally asked it, but now Margaret is double tapping it.
Yeah, so Scott Alexander's Moloch, I've read that and I'm quite familiar with that. And the holy crap, the Allen Ginsberg. I have seen the best minds of my generation crunching financial models for to maximize alpha, to maximize this above safe return or above market return. And what is capitalism but a conversion of the world into capital? It is quite literally a deadening process that turns living energy into the capacity for potential energy at a future date. You know, Moloch is the love of money, right? It's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. It's like the preferencing of the inert potential for change rather than living it in the present moment. So it's quite literally a projection outside of the present moment by extrapolating on past data. The only decision that takes place in the present moment is the decision to buy or sell. So that's almost the kind of sexual consummation of the transaction is the moment of transfer of ownership. And that's how it perpetuates. I know that's a little bit vague and high level, but Moloch in that sense is acceleration because of compound interest. You know, it's if you view you can go into dualistic like Zoroastrian concepts like Adora Mazda, the light bringer, and Ahriman, like the tendency of nature to reduce back into matter, you know, or the descent with life itself. Like the terminus of like naked capitalism is the conversion of everything into capital, into matter, which is quite dangerous. And so it always needs to be bounded. And when you're working there, you can actually see the tendency of that to continue unbounded and the effects that it has on people's psyche over time. I left about 6 to 9 months after getting warned by the 2 people I was closest in. If you stay in this, this will change you. This will change you. You know, it was repeated. I don't mean to be all doom and gloom about it, though. You know, I also want to codify that it's an incredibly powerful engine for looking at reality, for understanding how value is created, for understanding how truth and facts can actually be measured and conveyed over time. You know, a lot of these people stick to the facts, have a rather scientific and disciplined way of noticing it. And Warren Buffett also says, you know, you only need, you know, 115 IQ to make it big in this business. 130 is enough for everything. Beyond that, it's psychological stability over time. You know, 99% of his wealth came after the age of 50 due to the miracle or the terror, depending on the use you put in it, of compound interest. And he's giving most of that money to charity. Is it too late? Is it the right stuff? Ask Bill Gates. But the jam there is he will have ended up making a lot of positive personal difference in the world, although the system of compound interest, I would argue that we don't have time for it to work right now. I think that, and that's one of the reasons that I left, in addition to feeling the slippage of my own morals and not having my own fortitude to last in the world as a double agent without feeling myself slide and my own traumas coming to the surface and clouding my decisions, was I'm terrified that we don't actually have time to compound and convert into something new. So that comes to what kind of shift must happen for a new system to take place. Like, what kind of economic system do we need to overcome today's growing wealth inequality? I mean, there are a few things that are obvious low-hanging fruits, right? Universal healthcare is a must, and because one of the focuses of government is to crack down on undue monopolies of power, pay-to-play systems where you have to take place and the owners of that system can charge whatever price they want. Everyone has a monopoly over their own health. So anybody will be incented to pay whatever price they have. And you see that with Scarelli and the jacking up of pharmaceuticals companies. You see that all over the board. Another thing is defending the commons. So defending the ecological commons. Like, governments actually must be able to do that in order to ensure the health and well-being of citizens. Otherwise, these governments are illegitimate. Same with economic models. The low-hanging fruit, I would say, definitely a carbon cap and trade system. But is it even feasible in 2 and 4 year governmental cycles where climate and carbon legislation can be wiped from the board within such a short period of time, and that years of unilateral agreements can be wiped out with a single populist administration? I mean, hopefully this is a boil that we're bursting, but you know, with the Poland's populist president was reelected, like, this may not go away for quite some time. And do we have the time to move through it? Then at the far end of the spectrum, I've heard of technocratic systems, of a global carbon bank and carbon allotment and energy allotment that would require a world government that so many on the far end, near left and right, are afraid of, because it too could be manipulated by bad actors at the core, or flies in the face against people like the Koch brothers, who have built a series of shell corporations to successfully lobby their corporate interests into the minds of one half of the US and much of the world. So I'm sorry that my answer isn't giving more concrete information, but I think that the moral currency of the system. Oh, okay. This is actually a little bit more productive, right? So what established the primacy of the West? You could say that it is the corporate structure, credit, the capacity to invest in things with a long-term return. So it's trust. It's trust in some kind of future scenario and capacity to generate returns over time, right? So that built into just the weaponization and export of trust systems into lower trust climates without that infrastructure. So the Dutch West Indies Corporation and the British East India Company went and exported colonization to polities that hadn't developed this system of trust. They were so rich in natural resources that they didn't need to build these societal structures. And so it was taken from them and used to bolster this system of global inequality that impoverished the global South, that led to the exporting of human capital into the South of America to work plantations, that led to the unfair elevation of whites and especially white males to dominate over the global South, and the echoes of that to persist through history. So one thing that's really necessary is serious capital formation among disadvantaged groups and communities. I do think some degree of redistribution is in order, but also cultural shifts really against redlining, against systematic preferencing of white males in these positions of power. You know, there was one female analyst at my work. All of the other races represented were Asian, Indian in some way, but it was mostly white males. That was jarring to me and felt very, very brittle and overly constrained. But it is a honest representation of a lot of the what goes for diversity over the history of capital formation at large. It has yet to really change, and it needs to. It absolutely needs to, in order for a true diversity of opinions to come in. But that's still not changing the underlying ecological framework. There needs to be a price on the extraction of what we're taking from the planet in order to sustain this imbalance of power. And there hasn't been a price yet, and we're going to pay it in 50 to 60 years in a big way due to soil depletion, water depletion, all of the above. And that's being researched and priced in. And, you know, the military knows it, certain minds in finance know it, everybody knows and acknowledges it, but people are still playing the same zero-sum game structure. So how to convert to an infinite game and positive-sum games in a field where everyone is in this prisoner's dilemma, hell shelling point of defect, how to break the tit for tat, and how to get accept when, you know, if you become an ethical investor, the other guy is going to take the profits from X corporation or Y. I want to bounce this out because we could spend the whole call on this, and this is the big question that we're facing in this time. But I think just more voices need to be speaking this directly with accountability, and more fund managers and more heads of state need to be fucking saying this and speaking directly, regardless of the short-term economic consequences or their re-election chances or whatever donations they can drum up from large donors that actually perpetuates their capacity to spam messages to whatever their constituent base is, that passes for democracy in whatever this system actually is. Because it is not a democracy. And I know that, you know, I've seen politicians come in and out of high offices and meet with fund managers. I know that much. Excuse me.
Well, with 10 minutes remaining, or 9 minutes in this first part of the session, and getting close to where we'll go and continue this dialogue, the question that's coming up for me now is, so how shall we as a community, and just the people in this room, keep it personal, how should we relate to obtaining power or wielding power or experiencing Alphadom? And this might be something along the lines of the question that we take out into our breakout rooms in the dialogue. And so before going into a artistic expression to wrap us up, Duncan, your thoughts now on guiding us into our inquiry of how is it that we wield power with wisdom, or do we do that at all? How do we play the game? And whether you have a better question or something that points toward a direction for us to take in our sense making practice. Yeah,
absolutely. We are living in capitalism is a religious system with the idol of money, golden idol, golden bull, to be specific. We are living in a system where idols are measured based on how much money they're pulling in. You look at the sacred feminine of capitalism, that would be Kim Kardashian. You cannot read an article about her without how much money her Instagram posts are pulling in, and how, you know, her worth is based on measurements, a blank canvas for the projection of whatever qualities you want to put on, and the money that she is pulling in. You look to the other side of the spectrum, and I'm sorry to highlight that. You want to highlight that. You look at like the idols of finance. They are hopefully, and I'm fortunate, I've connected to a lot of people with an earnest desire to give back, and I believe that there are many there. The ones that make the news, the Scarellis of the world, are the ones that are the Girardian scapegoats of modern society. They are the agreed upon evil that has existed from all of society so that the system can perpetuate itself and off-gas inequality. It's not just that. It's the good actors who tithe to the environment and to education and aren't just like putting their names on buildings as a proxy for the length of their members. But the good actors also need to examine themselves. You have to look at the primary source. If the money is coming from zero-sum games, then that's what we're idolizing as a society. Silicon Valley is a little better in a lot of ways. You know, the platforms are all becoming more extractive by the day, higher ad load, higher time, you know, higher noise to signal ratio for their own profits and the profits of shareholders, especially as the founders transition out and professional management trickles in. You'll see that in every single platform. And the best of them, the people who can withstand this compression, and I will lionize Elon Musk here, because he's actually creating shit. He's building new things, and he's using the new wealth that he gets to get more credit, to build more amazing things in a race against time, because he actually gets the urgency of creating new worlds and creating new solutions. So we should really be lionizing not the people with the biggest bank accounts or the capacity to build platforms that capture public attention and then monetize those platforms, which is extractive. That's also rent seeking. You know, Facebook is incredibly rent seeking. Google is incredibly rent seeking. Wasn't always, but you know, is now. But you transition to the people who are truly building solutions, and it's the Stoa, amazing, right? Because it's a transition back to not just the Roman culture, but the Greek culture that spawned it. A culture of time and geras, of honor as the currency, and the geros, the war prize, the blood prize. What did you risk? What did you risk? What are you going to fight for? What will you risk your reputation for? What will you fucking burn beyond the deadening qualities of nihilism, which is just the death throes of a system collapsing on itself because it is so narcissistic as a system that it redefines everything as capital and can only see the world as that. And so its death throes will be a systemic apathy and nihilism in everybody who derives their sense of worth and being from that system. And yes, it does go back 7 generations, because that's what we're seeing. So it does actually take epigenetic reconditioning. It takes the yoga and the meditation, and it takes doing it in fucking earnest. And I haven't always been there. And there are temptations that come when you gain any level of power that's significantly greater than your peers in any field. There isn't a manual for abundance that is more than 2 sigma outside of the mean, because it isn't profitable to sell. But that's what we need as leaders. We need manuals for 2 sigma plus, for twice and thrice exceptionals, who would be so impacted by the world that they could curl up in narcissism or play power games as a way to punish the world for their childhood traumas. And I know because I played a few of them. And I want to call them out, and I want to stop them in myself and others who are very capable, but inflicted by these echoes or wounds, or inflicted by this systemic apathy, which again is just the system dying for something new to be born. So it's a renewed rekindling of personal practice, but not just sitting on your thumb on a yoga mat, connecting like this and building new games, creating something new, celebrating each other for that, pushing people to craft that voice that needs to be expressed, that speaks beyond the dead zone. That, I think, is a path to solution. That's why I left finance, and I'm working more in the creative arts and trying to build a platform for others to express themselves as well. And it's painful learning. I faced my own traumas. Any leadership roles require a lot, but it's a start, and I'm very, very open to feedback along the way, because we can't do this alone. Nobody can.
I would like to.
So that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I want to bring this home with an artistic expression. And so if you're ready and prepared for that, Duncan, then
absolutely,
that's what we'll get into. Since we are 2 minutes from the hour mark, I will, for anyone that might have to go for any reason, open the opportunity. Peter, if you do want to share any announcements or anything, then this would be a time. I know there's an event that tomorrow, as well as another Sensing the New Myth with Michael Mead, who's a renowned mythologist and storyteller and author. He'll be speaking on personal genius and how that relates to the collective rite of passage and initiation we're in now. So I'm really looking forward to having him on. He's a wise elder in my life. And yeah, Peter, anything at all?
Yeah, so first, thank you, Tyson. Thank you, Duncan, for visiting Stoa. It's greatly appreciated. Definitely check out the Sensing the New Myth event tomorrow with Tyson. And before that, at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the Meta Crisis of the Meta Crisis with Johannes and Niederhauser. And he's going to criticize this jazzy term, the Meta Crisis. So looking forward to that.
All right. Well, I really look forward to, I've got a few questions that are coming up for our collective dialogue in our breakout rooms. But before we get there, I want to invite Duncan to maybe to weave this all together in a way that expresses it better than any, and that is freestyle poetics. So I'm going to hit a beat here, and Duncan, the floor is yours.
Let's roll.
And this time it might be helpful to get real close to your mic.
All right.
How's this beat for you?
Power is a wellspring of temptation. If you want to find a dream beyond the false creation, you've got to reach inside yourself and go beyond the power of the castle. The high eye and the slaves to the vassal. When the master speaks, meet the all-seeing eye and polish the reflection of the organ sky. Volunteer, you can open it wide. If you can let your intuition decide, it'll be denied. But wait, false, the fires are speaking. If you want to understand what the flavor of the weak king's is, you spell it out wide and you reach to the future that's denied as I speak. Let it down, for the triumph of the weak falls now. If you want to understand, you can take the vow and let it lip out. You can give it in if you can speak it out. Hold on, we got a crackling now because the sound keeps shifting. But now, anyhow, because the world keeps shifting. As we speak our minds, we gotta open wide and let the truth decide. Let it inside and let it out. I've been humiliated 1,000 times with my false beliefs, with the way I've taken advantage of the words I speak, with the power in my gut, and I want to make it right. And I think everybody gets the chance to night, but thank you right now for sharing this light. We must share our all lights to speak all so bright, and you know that is true. And I do not incite something that's not in you. If you know it's all right, then you find it, you speak it, you open it wide, you let it decide, because that is the only thing that can move. It's not cognitive delusion that will seem prove. You can speak fiction, you can spit facts, you can talk maths, but that won't fit class, that won't move the masses like a hit of acid. You've got to open wide and let it all be passive. Don't go so passive, don't be so creative. You gotta open wide and let that speak. Don't hate it, fucking love, but love with a fire that is so damn bright that you light up and banish the exile of this night of capital. Moloch sent to the grave where he belongs because he wasn't anything to save. He was an echo and a trauma, never even real. It's just the arc of matter to refuse to feel. So you gotta feel. Number one, numero uno, get vulnerable, get true though. And don't echo in Girardian sacrifice games, boom, boom, tit for tat, because that's more of the same. You don't have to shame and guard with the shame. Yes, bad actors are exiled, but still beyond tame is true. And real power needs to be yoked to the truth. An engine that moves beyond passion or proof. It is fire, and let it all burn. These petrified woods to carbon return, then sequestered. Bury it deep, let it soil and spurn, for we all are asleep halfway. We're tired of the voices that shout, but we know that there is something to shout about, and we grow stronger for every word of truth that we speak. So I'm not talking about the flavor of the week. Thank you.
Thank you for heating things up so we can go and mix it all up. So I would like to surface a question, and whatever question is most alive to you in your breakout room, you can run with. So in this moment, we can all unmute yourselves. So if there's just a question that anyone wants to send us into the breakout rooms with to explore together, and then we'll come back and have a collective dialogue around it and what we explored. And yeah, for anyone that's got to go, that's cool. Thanks, Camille. And so let's see. Duncan, is there any question for you that you would like to send us into the breakout rooms with?
A question from me for the breakout rooms here?
Yeah, and then we'll explore that together in our individual conversations.
I would say, where have you been discouraged from creating value in your lives and sharing it with others? And given the world that we live in, what are actionable steps that you can create that value in a way that can move the world into a sustainable and inspiring direction? And I know that that's not quite on the topic, but that's just what's burning in me. I guess the distillation of that is how can we transition from toxic self-serving power to a sense of power which empowers yourself and others? How can you sustainably unlock that within yourself to empower a different story and a different vision within this world that we all share?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. And I'm inspired, Duncan, by you talking about your experience and just like being willing to explore the times where you face like the temptations of power, and then how that reveals in me to think about the moments where I have, and even in small sort of contexts and situations, seeks to leverage my personal power for my own personal gain, even potentially at someone's expense. And so I think for me, what is happening here that is meaningful is to, when those experiences, those moments, those temptations, desires come up, to talk about it, like to be open and honest. I'm experiencing this because I got my own fantasies and desires and things around power and feeling powerful that are less virtuous and less healthy. And so I do personally want to keep myself with like beauty and truth and goodness as a compass.
God, yeah. But
And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's probably much more useful to bring into the breakout rooms.
Yeah, so your question's good. And what I wanted to encourage was everyone to take this as an opportunity to talk about your personal experiences with that, with power, when you had power and when you used it in one way or another, in a way that felt good and right, or maybe a way that felt kind of wrong and dirty. And I think by allowing ourselves to get personal with it, that will help us answer or at least create ideas and deeper questions around Duncan's question.
And that level of self-acknowledgement, you're all beings. Probability dictates that you're all beings with a moral compass, and maybe one of you has different neurochemistry. But like sociopathy is where you deaden that sense of consciousness and conscience to the point where that feedback mechanism doesn't take place. And if you feel ashamed of your use of power, there will be a subtle voice saying, don't accumulate power, don't grow powerful. But if you listen to that voice without re-experiencing even like childhood trauma of like, I took the sugar when I was 3, and so I'll never do anything bad again, or like take the sugar, like, and you deaden that limits your capacity to enact and listen to that voice and listen and actually grow strong and virtuous. But it actually does take speaking about it to make that place open and real. So if you feel that trust, it's so valuable, especially as a person of virtue, to acknowledge and speak where your virtues have been lacking. And it's a journey for me, and it's an ongoing journey for me. But it's one that I'm really grateful for. Thank you again.
Yeah, great. Okay, so if anybody has any questions as I set these breakout rooms up.
Can he come back?
I would love that. And Jim, what would you suggest as the title or topic for the next session?
Epic rap battle, Tyson versus Duncan.
A zero sum rap battle or a positive sum rap battle?
Yeah, that's good. I've been thinking about that as the reframe for rap battles, or as freestyle in my sessions on Monday as a opportunity for argumentation, healthy argumentation, rather than battling one another and trying to tear each other down. How do we use freestyle to wrestle with one another in our ideas? That's been kind of happening organically at Flowing with Unknowingness on Mondays. And Duncan, I would love to see you there sometime.